Hello. Today I'm going to talk about my writing process. This is the second video in my playlist about writing, and it's the second part of the ideation phase, which I call the brick phase. And it's basically when you're gathering bricks, and what I mean by that is little pieces that you don't really know what you're going to do with, but your intuition is kind of latching onto them. And now these could be little snippets from things you're reading, because when you write a book, you should be reading books. And usually if I'm writing a book, I will have a pretty extensive reading list, and I do for this. It can be snippets from books. It can be things that people say, little snippets of conversation or dialogue, vocabulary words you run across, ideas you think up, like when you're about to go to sleep, or you're on a train or a bus or something and you get this idea, you gotta jot it down. I grab things from movies, from YouTube videos, all over the place. Really, basically my whole life. Anything that's going on in my life, I kind of absorb into my writing process. So I call them bricks because at first it's like when you have a construction site and they dump the big pile of bricks and they're all over the place. And then what are you going to do? Well, you have to figure out how to line them up and create your structure. So this is what I call the brick phase, but it's basically the dumping of a bunch of bleh into these files, and then it'll be organized eventually. I'm going to mention that a few weeks ago, I guess it was about 6 weeks ago, I went into a hotel room for 2 nights. I tend to do that when I'm trying to be focused on a book. Not just the writing time, but the beginning time is a very delicate place. It's very easy to lose your focus. And ideas are very elusive, and sometimes they'll come to you, and before you can get them and write them down or snag them somehow, they're gone. And so if you're doing this kind of work and there's a bunch of distractions, it's very easy to lose good ideas. The initial phases of a big project like this can be very, what's the right word? I don't want to say dangerous, that's the wrong word. Fragile is a better word. It can be very fragile, and it's easy to lose a good idea or to screw it up or to not find it exactly. So I think it's good to focus, and the best way to focus for me is to be in a hotel room, because my brain can switch over to this other kind of function, and I tend to be able to leave the world behind when I go into a foreign space. If I'm in my own home, it's easy to get distracted doing the laundry or taking a phone call, or there's always something that has to be done. If I can go to a hotel room, then I can that can be my focus 100%. So I knew I only had 2 days, but I was like, well, I'm gonna take that time and try to hash out as much as I can about the kind of nuts and bolts of the beginning phases of this book, which I will call New Elusis. And if you haven't seen the first video of this series, you probably should watch it, because it does talk about what I'm actually creating. But in this case, I'm going to talk about what happened on that weekend and what I found. I'm going to start with taking you on a little tour of my computer here. I tend to use several different programs when I am creating a book. I use predominantly Scrivener, Microsoft Word, Apple Notes, or it's a program called Notes on Apple computers, and Writer Plus. Those are the ones that I prefer. I do use a bit of Google Docs as well, but that is mainly just if I get some idea and I need to write it down. If I'm at work or something, I will do that. But typically those are the 4 programs that I use. Okay, so here is my Scrivener file for my book. And a lot of this, if you look on the left side of the screen here, I've made some rudimentary parts. So far the book, I think, is going to be in 3 parts. A lot of this I figured out in that weekend in the hotel room. Me just reading, looking at ebooks, print books, searching the internet if there's things that I'm not finding. I throw a lot of the notes into this file. You can see on the left here I'm even starting to create characters, even though I don't have much as far as their details yet. I have some possibilities for some locations, some places. But the important part down here is, at the moment, is called Notes. And I've been just throwing things into these files. And now, how I usually do that is I will read it and possibly take a picture. There you go. See here on the right hand side where it says Notes, I have some pictures here. I will throw them in there, or I will take notes on my phone app called Writer Plus. And if I'm at a restaurant or I'm at a bar, or I'm visiting some people and I have 5 minutes and I'm thinking or I'm looking up something, I try to use all my spare time as wisely as possible. So if I have 5 minutes here or 5 minutes there, waiting for a bus or waiting for a friend, I'll just be looking things up. Because once I start having these bricks, and I call them bricks, they're basically little pieces, like schematics or just little details on different things. I'll start throwing them in, and if you can see here, there's just things like Beltane and just little phrase like pseudo world, things like that. They stick with me when I read them or I come across them, and then I kind of pick them out. And then often those things will become bigger. They'll become, right now they're like little seeds. I mean, I call them bricks, but I guess they're more like seeds. Quotes by people, just different things. I mean, maybe, sometimes I'll throw a quote in and I won't even think that much about it, and then by the end of the book I'll realize that that's the quote, the epigraph, like the opening quote. And so you just never really know until you figure out the whole problem. And that's why it's really important to follow your intuition in this stage, because there are little things that you come across. Like, for example, it says read Picnic at Hanging Rock right here. I've seen the movie before, but then it came up in some of my research again, and I was like, what, I should probably just read that book. Now I don't know what it has in store for me. If it's that different than the movie, I don't know, but I'll start giving it a try, and then I'll know more if it actually leads me somewhere. But I suspect it will, because I mean, part of the reason I want to read it is because of the uncanny, and there's a lot of the uncanny in Picnic at Hanging Rock. So there's just different things. I write some of my own notes. I take things from other places, words, things like that. maybe if I have some dreams, I will throw them in a special section. Those often end up becoming part of the book in some way. At this point, I don't know what they're going to be, but it can be. Another thing I will do is if I'm doing other work on my computer and I come up with an idea on Apple computers, there's a program called Notes. If I go to the bottom right corner and I click there, it brings up my document, and as you can see, there are many of my notes in here also. I'm thinking about there being some kind of crime, so I did some research on crime novels just to kind of get an idea of how to structure something like that, because it's something I'm a bit unfamiliar with. So I copied and pasted that in here just to kind of remind me, and then other things I'm coming across I put in here. But eventually, once this is all kind of in a good place, I will copy and paste all this information into my Scrivener file. My Scrivener file is my main source of keeping things together. I'm already starting to get names for chapters and parts that just kind of popped into my head. Now, they will probably change as time goes on, but it's good to have something to start with. I kind of know at least the beginning of the story so far, so eventually I'll be hammering that part out first, I think, part one. That isn't always the case. There have been other books that I've worked on where I knew the end and I had to kind of reverse engineer the book. My second novel, I think, was a lot like that. I kind of knew where it needed to end, and so I had to figure out how to get there. So I also use this analog notebook. I've had many of these in my writing days. This is probably, I don't know, my 20 or 25th book or something. I don't know. When I'm out and about and I want to bring this, sometimes you go into a situation where you don't want to have to rely on the battery of your phone, and this is very useful. And so sometimes I will jot things down in this. Sometimes if I'm lying in bed, I also don't want to deal with the phone, so I will put notes in here. There's something very personal about it, and I don't know why our human tactile memory likes this kind of stuff. So whenever I'm using it, it almost makes me feel more like a writer, if that makes sense. It sounds kind of pretentious, but I don't mean it that way. I just mean feels right in some way. But if I come across a book or something, I'll write down the title, put it in there. Eventually, I might take a picture of these images and send them to the Scrivener file, or if it's just a few words, I'll just copy it into there. But then I also use this app, Writer Plus. I think this app is amazing. I love it. I use it every day. You can dictate into it, which is very handy. And it has the ability where you can send it to yourself in an email or to Google Docs or to some writing programs, or also in Korea we use Kakao Talk. You can send it that way. But I find it indispensable, especially during the writing process. I know that sounds strange, but often when I'm writing a book, I'm trying to do a certain amount of word count a day, and that isn't always possible in front of a computer. So sometimes if I'm walking from here to there, or I have a spare few minutes, I will take out my phone and start dictating words into this program, and then I can eventually send it to myself. But I've noticed that the AI for the dictation is quite good, better than Google or other things on my phone that I've used. Like I've used the AI on Microsoft Word for the dictation, and it's not that good. It's quite slow. On this app, I think it's quite fast, and it's usually pretty accurate. So I've actually written entire erotica stories on my phone just by speaking into them. I mean, like the first draft, just getting it out, and then I go back and rewrite it several times, obviously. But I think the app is great for that, and it's pretty indispensable. I also use this whiteboard that I'm showing. I have this hanging in my bedroom/office. I use it mainly to put things up that I want to remind myself about. In this part of the book, it's going to be mainly books I need to read and some things I need to work on. I need to figure out the main character. I think there are 3 characters that are going to be very important in this. And so quite soon, I'm not sure when, but in the coming weeks, I will start making very basic character outlines for them. Once I kind of know what they are, I will end up making a better character outline later, a more in-depth one. But at this point of the game, I have to just get it to a point where I can kind of get my head around the idea. So I will do that. But I also want to make an outline of the mystery rites from Eleusis. And the reason I want to do that is because I think if I understand the hierarchy of process of the initiation, at least based on what we know, I think it will give me some insight into how I need to structure the novel, because that kind of initiatory rite is going to be in the background. It's not the story, but it is a major element of the story. It's part of the world. So I think if I understand that very clearly, it will help me in terms of trying to finish the ideation phase of the plot, because I know there's going to be, I don't want to call it a crime, but there will be a mystery involved in this, and I will probably outline that as well. So once I have the kind of character outline and the initiatory rites outline, then I have the basics of the mystery or the crime, let's call it. Once I have those 3 things, I think I can kind of form the story a lot better. And like I said before, I think that every creative work is its own problem. When I wrote my 3rd novel, Dominique's Confession, part of the problem with that novel is it's historical fiction, and it's primarily set in the late 1920s, like 1929, right before the stock market crash. So I had to be very, very, very detailed about dates and the chronology of these historical events in tandem with where my story was going to go. So I had to make this very detailed timeline of all kinds of things, like not just major historical events, but I had to make sure that certain clothes were already invented and certain words were already invented. So I had to like really look into that, and it was definitely difficult. I don't think this novel is going to be as hard as that one in that aspect, because it's not based off of history, not completely. I'm taking that kind of initiatory rite and I'm making it my own. So I'm taking the template of that and creating my own mythology around it. So I don't think that's going to be as difficult. But I don't know. And that's part of any kind of creative project, is you can't tell the future. So you try to not plan, but you try to cover your bases as much as you can to get it to the point where it just starts to come alive. And then once it comes alive, then it's just a process of making it happen. But it's really delicate in those beginning stages. And yeah, I mean, the more you have to kind of help you form it in the beginning, I think the easier your struggle may be. So we'll get into that more in the following videos, but for now, that's all I got for today. If you know anybody that's a writer and you think they might benefit from this, you should pass these videos on to them. I would appreciate it, and maybe they might get something out of it. So that's about all I got. I will see you next time. Take care.